Cynthia Kadohata is a second-generation Japanese American. This means her parents, although of Japanese descent, were also born in the United States. Specifically, Cynthia was born in Chicago, Illinois on July 2, 1956. Even though she was born in Chicago, most of her childhood was spent on the road. The wandering Kadohatas moved from Illinois to Arkansas, where Cynthia's brother was born, then on to Georgia, Michigan, and back to Chicago, where her sister was born. When Cynthia was 15 years old, the family put down roots in Los Angeles, California, although by that time her parents had divorced and established separate households. Cynthia was an intense and dedicated student. An avid reader, she was especially drawn to any books that featured animals. Among her early favorite books were Charlotte's Web by Edith White and White Fang by Jack London. Although she enjoyed reading, Cynthia had no interest in becoming a writer. Actually, her plans were to become an astronaut, which she claims never would have worked out because she gets severe motion sickness. While in Chicago, Illinois, she attended an alternative high school. But when the family moved to Los Angeles and Cynthia entered Hollywood High, many of her credits did not transfer. She eventually dropped out of school, partly because she felt she simply did not fit in. She admitted she became extremely shy. It got to the point that going to the grocery store and talking to the cashier really made her nervous. After leaving school, she took a job as a clerk in a department store and then flipped hamburgers at a fast food restaurant. When she was 18 years old, Cynthia was admitted to Los Angeles City College. She later transferred to the University of Southern California, where she received a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism in 1977. After graduation, 21-year-old Cynthia had a life-changing experience when a car jumped a curb and barreled into her as she was walking down a street in Los Angeles. The accident left her with a broken collarbone and a severely damaged right arm. It also made Cynthia realize that anything could happen at any moment. During her recovery, Cynthia went to live with her sister in Boston, Massachusetts. It was there, while wandering through the city's many bookstores, that she rediscovered her love of reading, a hobby she had abandoned as she grew older. Cynthia devoured dozens of books of short stories, finally concluding that you could say anything with fiction that you couldn't say any other way. While working at various temporary jobs, Cynthia began writing her own stories and submitting them to national magazines including The Atlantic and The New Yorker. The first story she submitted had an offbeat plot featuring a world that was inhabited by a one-legged duck. Over the next 4 years, the struggling writer submitted over 40 stories to magazines and was rejected time and time again. Cynthia was persistent, however, and finally in 1986, The New Yorker accepted a short story called Charlie O. Several other stories were subsequently purchased by other magazines, including the Pennsylvania Review. All of the tales would eventually end up becoming chapters in Cynthia's first novel. While submitting stories, Cynthia was taking classes at the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania and New York's Columbia University. Her advanced education was cut short when she was discovered in 1988 by literary super agent Andrew Wiley. Wiley had read one of Cynthia's New York stories and was so intrigued he wrote 2 letters asking to represent her. A stunned Cynthia agreed, and soon after, Wiley sold The Floating World to the publishing company Viking Press. Even after the book was released in 1989, the fledgling writer had a hard time believing she was truly a published author. The Floating World is about a 12-year-old Japanese-American girl named Olivia, whose family, like Cynthia's own, lived a transition existence crisscrossing the United States in the years following the World War II. As Olivia grows to become a young adult, she must do so in very close quarters and under the watchful eyes of her parents. Because the family does everything together, including sometimes sleeping in the same room, Olivia must also contend with her grouchy grandmother, who is frequently physically and emotionally abusive. The family does eventually leave the floating world of gas stations, motels, and truck stops to settle permanently in Arkansas, where Olivia finally, in a stable home, has the freedom to grow up. For her next novel, In the Heart of the Valley of Love, Cynthia traveled much further ahead in time, setting her story in Los Angeles in 2052. In Cynthia's fictional world, the city is in shambles, with tension consistently erupting between two groups: the haves, who live in the rich towns, and the have-nots. Although it is a futuristic novel, it also tackles contemporary issues. At that time the book was published in LA, LA was experiencing a series of race riots. At the center of the story is 19-year-old Francie, a girl of mixed Asian and African background. Creating the character was a very personal journey for Cynthia. For her next book, Kira Kira, which Cynthia released in 2004 and won the Newbery Medal in 2005, the story focuses on a 10-year-old Katie Takashima, a first-generation Japanese-American whose family moves from Iowa to Georgia after their grocery store goes out of business. Once again, Cynthia returns to memories of her childhood in describing life for a Japanese-American in a small southern town. Cynthia describes Katie's first taste of discrimination in such vivid and frank detail that it is easy to believe that she is writing from first-hand experience. The author also draws on her father's past. Katie's father is forced to work grueling hours in the town's poultry plant. The biggest problem Katie must face, however, is watching her older sister Lynn struggle with cancer. Because their parents work long hours, the two girls are particularly close. In fact, Lynn taught Katie her first word, Kira Kira, which means glittering. Katie uses the term to describe anything she really likes. Following her Newbery win, Cynthia got a chance to do her favorite thing: travel the country as she visited schools and libraries across the United States to speak about Kira Kira and life as an author. Her traveling days had to be limited because she had her young son, who she adopted in 2004, waiting for her at home. Cynthia lives in Los Angeles with her son Sammy and the other love of her life, her Doberman dog, Shakira Kajoka, whose name means dear little deer. In 2005, Cynthia was hard at work on her next children's book, Wee Flower, scheduled to be released in 2006. Like her previous novels, Wee Flower was inspired by her family's history. Cynthia's father's family lived in an intermediate camp on the Colorado River Indian Reservation during World War II, and the story provides a fictionalized look at a friendship that springs up between a Japanese-American girl living at the camp and a young American Indian boy. When researching Wheat Flower, Cynthia spoke with her father to get details. Soon, thousands of others will know the story and share their care. Cynthia Kadohata, an award-winning American writer of Japanese ancestry, has published a number of short stories in prestigious literary journals, as well as 2 novels about the coming-age experiences of young women of Japanese-American heritage. Her background and experience have inspired each of her novels about young Asian American teens. In fact, many of her most vivid memories, both good and bad, have found their way into her novels.